What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Major Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Hope you're doing well. Now, if you're listening to Sirius Radio in your car or at home or on your phone, then I guarantee you've probably heard the voice of my next guest. Joining on the show today is none other than Ryan Paton from Sirius XM. You've probably heard him on NHL or Canada Talks. Ryan, how you doing today?
Oh, Wes, I'm good. It is so good to see you. I know it's been a long time and we're kind of still in this virtual world we live in, but yeah, it's good to see you and I appreciate it, man. So yeah, I'm doing well.
Now, for those who, maybe aren't as familiar with where they can find you on the Sirius XM dial, what channels are you actually on?
Yeah, so my main one is Monday to Friday, which is Sports Talk Today. So that's 6 to 7 Eastern, my shameless plug. And that's on Sirius XM channel 167. And then I do a show on the NHL Network, which is channel 91. And that's on the weekend. And then when the NHL ramps up again, I do more stuff on 91. So basically the two channels are 91 and 167.
Now, I remember when, Sirius first started to kind of come on the air, and, the idea of paying for radio, that's novel. But it's exploded and there are channels all across the board. So for someone who doesn't know, what's it like behind the scenes at Sirius XM Canada?
It's a good question. I've been there for about 10 years now, and there's been a lot of changes. When I first started, speaking behind the scenes, we were in this basement office, and what they did, we were underneath an electronics store. So you go in and you go down these stairs and just into this dark hole kind of thing. And you open up the door and you think, how the heck can any station broadcast North American wide actually work from what we see? So there were 3 studios, but at the time, even then, they were saying, you know what, we have to expand. We have to find more space. We're just too crammed in. So we moved to another spot, and it's so much better. We have an entire floor. It's open concept. You've got 4 studios, one main one where the NHL goes out of, and 3 other ones with Canada Talks that goes out of as well. I like, one of the biggest things I like, and you made a good point about the whole paying for radio thing. What I like about Sirius is whenever you want something, you can get it, right? So say you like classic rock, you go to a channel, you can get it. There's no commercials. Well, some people come on and they talk about whatever, but there's nothing like that. And when it comes to what we do, there's a few commercials and breaks during the show. But if you want to find something to do, say on Canada Talks with politics at 10 in the morning, there's a show devoted to politics. For sports, there's one 6 to 7 for sports. So I like that part of it because to me, I'm sure you know about this too, Wes. I mean, people are picky, right? Like people are just, they want things, they want it quickly, they want them now. And I think Sirius is a good way to get that. So that's one of the biggest things I like about that. And behind the scenes, it's fun. I mean, I have a producer and we go back and forth, and I have a lot of hands-on stuff with the show. He has a lot of hands-on stuff with my show. So it's I like to think we have a good relationship, but don't ask him because he may tell you another reason or another answer to that.
Now, obviously specializing in sports talk radio as you do, as we're coming into the pandemic, things are, as far as the sports aspect goes, sort of kind of back to normal. But I can imagine, like at the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, well, what the hell do we talk about now?
Yeah, it was, I was approached when March 2020 hit. So when the NBA shut it down, then the next day the NHL shut it down. Not that I remember that. Of course I do, because that was a pretty big deal. And right at that moment, I thought to myself, okay, what are we going to do? So I was approached by the powers that be, and they said to me right away, they said, okay, you know what? I think we'll just shut the show down. And when things start to come back, whenever that is, then we'll get you back into it. So I remember hanging up the phone, and then I started thinking about it. And I thought, you know what? No, this is a time when we can really explore our creative abilities. And let's keep going, and let's try to find different avenues per day, per show, that we can just keep listeners engaged. So I came up with was from probably the end of March to, I don't know, whenever kind of golf came back and racing and all that type of stuff, about 2 months worth of just documentary style shows. For example, I did one on the 1996 Canadian Olympic 4x100 men's team. And I had everybody on there, Donovan Bailey, Glenroy Gilbert, Robert Esme. And it was a full hour of just reminiscing about that. And for them, it was neat for them to go back in time and reminisce, because they had never been together. Donovan told me they'd never been together since 96 to talk about the event. And so they were doing it on my show. So we did just different documentary style shows, kind of let's go back and look at the best hockey players of all time, stuff like that. And surprisingly, the time flew by. It really did. And I'll give credit to everybody. We didn't miss a beat at all. But now that sports is back, it's a lot easier, to be honest, because the stories kind of write themselves, so we don't have to create them. But I took it as a chance to keep going and be creative, and it worked out.
With the ability to kind of create those episodes, those specials and whatnot, how much creative freedom do you as a host kind of / producer have in developing content for Sirius?
And that's another good thing about the company, Jason, is that we have basically, when we're given the show, we're given the show. So this is yours. You do with it how you will. Don't take it to that extreme of, especially with language. I know you can do it on Sirius XM, a lot of the channels, but ours we don't, which I'm fine with because I'm not that type of guy anyway. So that's pretty much the only holdback, I guess, that I was given. Outside of that, they said, if this has anything to do with sports, like even if it's a couple of discussion points over the course of an athlete or even an author coming on, if he writes a sports book, then do it. So for me, that's really helped me. To be honest, that's helped me during this whole pandemic thing, to try to keep going and stay fresh as much as I can. So they give us the ability to do what we want. And if there's times that different people cross the line, which that does happen, then we're talked to about it, which I never have, which is great. But at the end of the day, one of the best things about it is I can do what I want with my show. And I think that's a good thing.
Over this past year and a half, you're seeing obviously a rise in things like podcasts coming out. Speaking from experience, this is how we're doing a podcast right now.
Yeah.
But because of the forced isolation of the pandemic, do you find that talk radio kind of filled that gap as far as the need for conversation, even if people are kind of like that third wheel, kind of just listening into the conversation?
Yeah, I think so, because when sports kind of shut down, and I looked, when the pandemic hit, I looked back to September of 2001, September 11th, the attacks on the World Trade Center in the U.S. And I remember I was at SCORE, formerly with you, and we did a lot of great work together there. And I was doing a show called Diamond Surfing. And I remember waking up that morning and seeing the attacks. And then I got a call saying, you know what, we're just going to take a break for a couple of days because this is pretty intense, and then we'll come back. And what I remember thinking of, I think the first time I came back on the air, I said, sports is a reprieve. It's an escape for people to get to when other things in life happen, and whether it's personal, whether it's on a global scale, whatever. So when the pandemic hit, that's all we heard about, right? And sports was taken away. So if the pandemic hit and I know it wouldn't have happened, but if it shut down the world on a global scale outside of sports, people could look to sports and forget about all the other stuff that's happening. But when we had that taken away optically, I didn't want to turn the TV on, to look at, the latest on COVID cases, because it was depressing. So if you go to radio, and if you want to go to sports radio on where I'm talking about, then I think that was a good thing. So to be honest, when it looks at some of the ratings and different things like that, from my point of view, they really ramped up. They really have been very good for the last 15, 16 months. So a long answer, but to answer your question, I think it did help people get that avenue to kind of take a step back from everything else that they're dealing with and all the negativity. Because, look, let's face it, the last 60 months, right, it's been a lot more negative than positive. Which when it comes to COVID, you kind of want it to be that way, negative, not positive, right? So, but at the end of the day, I think radio was a good crutch for people to rely on to help them get through whatever they were getting through.
Pandemic audience aside, how has the reaction been to the Canada Talks channel and your show?
It's been good, and what I've really tried to do is the name Canada Talks obviously suggests it's from Canada and you talk about Canadian things, but we go North American wide, right? So what I try to do, I think more than the other shows, is focus not just on Canada, but focus in on sports in general. And we're talking like around the world as well. I had a lady on, Catherine Switzer, who was the first woman to compete in the Boston Marathon, I think in the 60s, if I'm not mistaken. And she joined me from New Zealand. She was in New Zealand. So I kind of like to hit a global market if I can. And I have a lot of guests come on from the States. I know a lot of people from my days on TV and a lot of people as well from the NHL Network, but I try to make it a North American thing because I want to engage listeners from the US as well, not just Canadian ones. Because as I said, the show says Canada Talks. So you assume, well, let's just talk about the CFL, let's talk about the Canadian teams, let's talk about the Raptors, the Jays, stuff like that. No, let's talk about them, but also talk about, the 30 some odd other teams in hockey and all the ones in baseball too. So I kind of take pride in making it not just a Canadian one, but a North American one as well.
Now, you did mention, your TV background and whatnot. So can you kind of walk us through your broadcasting journey and what it took to get to Sirius XM?
Well, you were a big part of that, Wiz. We had some good times, buddy. We had some really good times. One of my favorites, man, honestly. One of my favorites to work with. We had a lot of fun. Yeah, so it was a weird beginning for me. And I kind of wanted some point. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if you believe it, it'll happen whenever it's meant to be again. But I'd love to get back into TV at some point down the road. I've done some acting things in the last 2 and 3 years, kind of thing like that. But my love is really TV, but I love doing radio as well. And it all started in a strange way. So I went to university. I got my degree in political science, to which I'm clearly using my degree in what I'm doing. And I love sports. So I wanted to get into sports. Obviously, I wanted to play when I was young, but I wasn't good enough to think about doing that as a career. So my last year at university, I volunteered at the campus radio station. And I was given like the news, weather, and sports updates on, say, a Friday morning and a Saturday morning. And then I was handed the color commentating duties for the hockey team, for the university hockey team. And I had no idea, right? I had no idea what I was doing. I knew about the team. I did research, but I had no idea how to present the product. So it was raw. I'll be honest, it really was. And looking back at it, I don't even want to remember how raw it was. So after that, I took it and thought, you know what, that was a good experience. What else can I do? And then I reached out to a bunch of different people. And long story short, I was given a chance to intern at then Headline Sports, which turned into The Score, which now, of course, is Sportsnet 360, whatever it is now. And I was given a chance to intern. And I did the night shift. I mean, I got, there's the old story of, for all these hosts, right, that they're going to ask you to get them cups of coffee. And they did. They asked me to get them cups of coffee, and I went to get them cups of coffee. I wrote them their scripts. I made sure that they were good. I made sure the makeup was fine. I did camera work. You name it, I did it. But I wanted to get on the air. That was the ultimate goal. And I would stay sometimes late at night. And maybe this was before you started, but I would go till 2, 3, 4 in the morning sometimes when everybody was gone. And some members of the crew, they stayed on with me to do a quick demo tape. So I would do a 15-minute tape, or I'd do in the edit suites, as you remember, do a voiceover of a pack or different packs like that. And I would just keep doing it on my own time. And then Christmas party came, and our boss at the time, we had to do these skits, and I was part of a skit, and I was up on the desk, and I think actually, Jason, and actually I know this is true, and ask Dave, because you were with Dave Lannis at College of Sports Media, and we were doing the skit pretty much on Dave Lannis. And we had this video of this guy who looked like Dave running the streets in LA. And we kind of made it a funny thing. Oh, there's Dave. He's trying to get a story. He's late again as usual and whatever. So then my boss saw that on that Christmas party night as I was leaving, and he was outside, and he said, that was a cool tape, a cool thing you guys did. I said, oh, thanks. And they said, no, it was a good job. You did a really good job. Didn't think anything of it. And then about 2-3 weeks after that, I was given a chance to go on a weekend shift and do like a horse racing update or something. I'd come in, do the quick in, and then, hey, here's what's happening tonight. The Jays are in action, yada, yada, yada. Then let's get back to Woodbine. And that's how it started. And then I was given, the chance to do diamond surfing, and then Score Today, and then some weekend shows with some hosts. So, yeah, in a nutshell, it was a weird way to go about it, but I give myself some credit just to kind of stick with it. So that's that. And then I ended up, being let go, unfortunately, and then found my way to radio. And a lot of it's a small world, as you know, Wiz. Just everyone seems to pop up at the same place at different times. And that's how I landed at Sirius, and here I am to this day.
When you think back to those early, the dry runs and the demo reels and whatnot, as you were trying to, better your craft, how much did you go back to, those early takes and sit there and really dissect, how you came across on camera or how your voice sounded? And today, do you still do that? Do you still listen to your broadcast and sit there and go, okay, but I can still do better?
Here's what I did. When I did those dry runs and did those takes, I would watch them over and over again in the edit suites, before I would submit them to, whoever to look at them and let me know what they thought. And then when I was able to get on the air, I watched maybe for 2-3 weeks off and on, because, with the wheel, right, they kept repeating different things. And sometimes I'd record myself at home, and then I'd get home and I'd watch it. But then I stopped. I did not watch anything else for probably 8-9 years, 10 years. With radio, I have not heard one of my full broadcasts ever. And the reasoning is probably I'm very critical of myself. And if somebody is to say to me, okay, you know what, this is something that you should work on, if they see it, then I go back and think, okay, yeah, I'll do it. But I don't look back to say the video before that they looked at that got them to think about that. I just think, okay, that's what they think. So the next time I do it, I'll try to implement that into my broadcast. And the same thing with the radio. If there's something that they say, oh, you may say this too much, or you may do this a little bit too much. I think about it, but I don't listen to anything. The next day or next show I do, I think, okay, I'll try to put that into my broadcast. So I don't like to listen. I'm very critical of myself. And I've come to the point where some people will like what I do and some people won't like what I do. And I don't worry about the ones that don't like what I do, because I can't, make everybody happy at the end of the day. So if I wasn't so critical of myself, maybe I would. But so that's kind of a different way to go about it. But I listen to it first, somebody telling me, and then I go and fix it. I don't look back to what I did and hear it for myself. I just kind of take that next step for that way.
Now, during your time at the Score, there was a very, very cool moment in time where the Score had the English language rights to the Montreal Expos. Now, for our listeners who don't quite know what I'm talking about, the Montreal Expos were once a baseball team that was ended up in Canada. Exactly, right? Before they moved down to Washington, and you were part of the broadcast team for the last ever Expos game in Canada. How was that moment?
Just gave me chills, Wes. Honest, it really did. It was a beautiful yet sad moment all into one. It was a beautiful night. I remember we got down there, I think the day before. And first of all, the whole baseball thing too, you mentioned Canada, we had the baseball rights, and that kind of started the diamond surfing show, which was a lot of fun. And then we ended up going to Montreal. So we got down the day before, got to see the city, went inside the Big O in Montreal, and it had been there since the 70s. And I mean, the Expos, they were a storied franchise, right? Like Jackie Robinson was part of the Montreal Royals years before that. So he started off, and then they grew to that 94 team, which was arguably the best in baseball. The strike happened and some incredible players to go through the system. So then the next day, I mean, I was nervous, I'll be honest. And I didn't really get nervous a lot when I did some TV work, but this one I was, because I knew it was a really big deal. And so I would do the host part of the broadcast, and then the play-by-play would be done by Sam Cosentino and Rance Mullinex, former Jay. And they would come to me off and on throughout the game, and I would be interviewing different members of the 94 team. Ken Hill was there, for example. I chatted to him. And then some of the members of the upper brass, Marquise Grissom as well. And I would go throughout the stadium And it was really neat to chat with them about their memories of the Expos. But one of the coolest things that I did, and probably one of the most emotional things I did, was at some point in the game, I think it was in the 7th inning, and the Expos they were getting killed. The Florida Marlins it was not a good game to end for Montreal. But I went in the stands and I found this lady who had been a season ticket holder since the Big O Open for the first game in Montreal. And I crouched down with her, and she was right along the edge of the walkway. So I crouched down and I chatted with her for probably 10 minutes. And, Sam and Rance didn't say anything. They just kind of let the visuals do the talking. And the emotion in her voice, she started crying. She said, I get how this is a business. I understand that, sports is not just a game and this happens, but she said, I'm just devastated. And she starts crying. And that was hard, because look at somebody who's doing that and you think, I've got to still conduct an interview here. What else can I get from her where she won't completely break down and say, I can't do this, and walk away? So that really hit home to me. And then at the end of the game, we had Dave Van Horn on, the longtime voice of the Expos. Randy St. Clair was on the field. Tim Raines was on the field with me as well. And we did this roundtable. And I remember signing off too. Sorry, I'm long-winded, but it was a really cool memory. I remember signing off too. And I looked at the camera and I said, thanks to Montreal for the great memories. I said, Washington, you're getting a good team. Make sure you take care of them. And then I said, for the last time, I said, bonne nuit, au revoir from Montreal. And I kind of ended it with that French take with the city of Montreal. It was an emotional couple of days, but I was really thankful that I was part of it. Yeah.
Every now and then, when a team is, dealing with attendance issues or dealing with stadium issues, the idea is always floated of, well, they can always move back to Montreal.
Yeah.
Do you ever see a return of the Expos to La Belle Province?
I do. And I think it is going to happen, because there's been discussion with the city of Tampa and about how at some point, I think in 25-26, a lease agreement runs out at Tropicana Field or something like that. I forget the actual intricate details about it, but there was always talk of, well, nobody goes to games in Tampa. And that was the joke as well when baseball came back after the pandemic. The joke was, well, there's 4,000 fans in Tampa because of COVID protocols, but that's a normal game for Tampa even anyway, if there's no COVID. I think it will. Baseball is huge in Montreal. Look at when the Jays play. They always have those 3 games before the season begins, right before the season begins. And the Big O was filled with 40, 45, 50,000 people. And when Russ Martin played for the Jays, in the 15-16, those great runs by Toronto, it was just such a magical thing. And I think it would work. I really do. I know that Rob Manfred now is not a huge fan of it. I know that. And there's a lot of stuff that has to be involved in it. And if it does go back to Montreal, let's face it, you've got to sustain it, right? You got to make the money to make baseball think it is a good investment going forward. Because back to what I'm saying about sports being a business, it's still a business. But even my biases aside, Jason, I really do think that it will at some point. I hope in this decade, but I do see it happening at some point down the road.
When you think about teams that have left the province of Quebec, which moment do you think hurt more for Quebec sports fans? The Nationals winning the World Series, or the Colorado Avalanche winning the Stanley Cup?
These are tough. I didn't expect this from you. And as we joked before we came on, I'm usually on the other end of this. I'm the one asking and different things like that.
Oh, the roles are reversed now.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm done. I'm going home. No. I'm going to say it was the Nationals, because the Montreal Canadiens still existed, and they still exist. So there is still a team in Quebec. But when the Avalanche did win, it was really, it hurt them, I know, because the team that Quebec had that went to Colorado, I mean, Matt Sundin, Joe Sakic, Chris Drury, Alex Tanguay, Steve Duchesne. It was a really good Colorado team. that went to Quebec team that went to Colorado. So, but I'm going to say it was the Nationals because there is still a team in the province of Quebec. So I'll leave it at that. That's the answer. But they still both hurt.
You're listening to the Made You Mixtape podcast. My guest today is Ryan Paton from Sirius XM Canada. We're going to step away for 2 seconds, and when we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about Ryan.
We're going to take it back a little bit, back to 1992.
Oh, yeah, that song. It was like almost on my list, but it just didn't make it.
All right, you're bringing in wrestling references now.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to bring in a little bit of everything. I heard that song so many times at a strip club.
Who hasn't heard it at a strip club?
I'm sure it's being played at some strip club right now.
I know it's a Christmas song.
Yeah, you went weird on this, Brian. I'm sorry.
Bro, this is left field, man.
I don't care. It is such a great song.
What's up, everyone? This is Gomez.
And I'm Brian.
And we're the dynamic duo and co-hosts of Playlist Wars,
A podcast where we, along with a special guest, pick a musical artist, band, or topic, and each create a 10-song playlist that we feel best represents them.
Then we turn it over to you to vote for which one of us got it right.
You can find us at playlistwarspodcast.com.
Or wherever fine podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. Joining me today, Sirius XM Canada host Ryan Paton. Now, Ryan, it's time to learn a little bit about you. We've had our sports talk, we've had our broadcasting talk. It's time to learn about Ryan.
But that's where I'm more comfortable. I don't know where this is going to go.
Oh, no,
go ahead. I agreed to this, so go ahead.
It's hot seat time, Ryan. Come on.
Okay.
But we'll ease you into it, though. Okay.
All right.
What was it that made you want to get into broadcasting to begin with?
It was probably my love for sports, but it was also when I was a kid, I would be listening to Tom Cheek and Jerry Howarth, the voices of the Jays. And we know Tom has long passed away and Jerry's not doing that anymore. But what I would do is I go to bed, and this was when I was really young, right? So I'm not going to basically date myself because then that'll give away my age. So we're not going to do that. But I would go to sleep listening to the Jays, listening to Tom and Jerry doing their thing, and I would have the radio on a timer, so it would stay on for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, then it would go off. But I'd be so engaged in the game that I would get up from the bed and I would go back on radio and then click more, 15 to 20 minutes. And at that point, I just thought I liked the idea of telling a story. And if I can tell a story, if I can't play sports, but if I can tell a story that has to do with sports, then why not try that? So that's kind of where it started for me. Did I think, Jason, that I would end up doing it? No, I was shy in school, couldn't stand debating class. I'd never liked to speak in front of people. I would have the sweats. I mean, talk about getting to know me. Here we go. I'd have the sweats. The heart rate would be like I felt sick to my stomach every time I would speak. And now, all those years ago, when I was like that, this is what I've been doing for a long time, and I don't feel that at all. So, I guess the love started when I was younger. I just kind of wanted to tell a story, and this is a great way to do it.
Baseball, the very nature of the sport, translates well to radio. Do you find certain sports do translate well to radio, and some sports where it's just like, no, it needs to be on TV?
Yeah, that's a great question. Baseball does, because there's so much dull time. So if I can probably listen more to a baseball game than watch a baseball game. Vin Scully was the greatest, I think, storyteller, and he did it so many years for the Dodgers, and he was the only one. He had no color commentator. So if there was a 5-hour game that went to 15 innings, Vin would have to fill the gaps between every single pitch. I think baseball translates to radio. I think hockey does too, even though hockey is so visual. But if you're not able to watch a hockey game, with it being so fast, you're able to picture what the play-by-play announcer is describing in a game of hockey. And sometimes I find myself, and it's funny you mentioned this question, because I think in the playoffs at some point I was driving around and I was listening, and I exhale after a minute and a half or 2-minute flurry. I can't remember the game, but it was just exciting, and there's no crowd, but it was, they pumped in the crowd noise. but you just gotta, I took a breath. I thought, man, that was good. But I could picture everything. So I can do that. And basketball to me is not one which really translates as well with radio. So out of the big four, and football kind of not the same. So out of the big four, I think baseball and hockey are the ones that translate the most.
Obviously, if there's a game on that you're interested in, you're probably going to listen to that, if you're in the car kind of thing. But if there's nothing going on, like if it's a kind of a dead day in sports and you find yourself, having to do a decent length road trip, do you still personally, lean towards listening to talk radio, or are there times where you're just like, nope, crank it up, get the music going?
I crank it up and change. Yeah, I change it. And, it's a lot of times I'm asked over the years, kind of the same question in maybe a different way, but, did you pay attention to so-and-so? I say, you know what? I'm actually not the last couple of days, just because I need to shut it down. I just need to take that break. And because you can get so consumed with it, right? You can get so consumed. I'm not saying it's not healthy, but there's other parts of life that you need to also focus on. So, but I can tell you this though, if I do step away from it for a day or two, I really feel like there's something missing. So I kind of like, shoot, I really tried to do it, but I can't. But if there's any time that I get a chance to just relax and do a reset, I try to not focus in as much on, because there's other things in life, right? As you know, that give you joy. So that's kind of what I do.
So when it comes time to hop in the car, do the road trip, the music is playing.
I knew this was coming.
What channels are you listening to?
Okay, so I've been thinking about this because you gave me an idea that you were gonna kind of like a mixtape, right?
We're getting to that in a little bit.
I thought this was the one. Okay.
No, I'm just wondering what genre of music you lean towards.
So I am a 80s hits kind of guy. If I can plug Sirius XM channel 8, which is the best of the 80s. And I also in the last couple of years have gone into a bit of country. Kind of like the old school country. Garth Brooks, just getting into a bit of that, because country these days, I think there's a lot of rock involved in it. Not that I'm a professional when it comes to distinguishing these music genres, but at the end of the day, Wes, I think because in the 80s was my decade, I love it. I love going back to the 80s. I got a ton of them on my playlist, whether it be the gym playlist or just kind of a road trip kind of thing. So, I like any 80s music, even the bad stuff, because the bad stuff, Wes, is really good.
You say the bad stuff from the 80s. Are we still talking, Falco doing Rock Me Amadeus?
Yes, Rock Me Amadeus. We have to do that one.
I now apologize to all the listeners of the podcast who are now Rock Me Amadeus in your head. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not catchy, right? It's not a catchy song.
No. You got the Rock Me Amadeus, but there's often that thought that, that time frame or that age, if you were a certain age at a certain time, to you, that's the best music. Do you find that you've gotten to a point where you stop listening to new music, or do you still find it interesting to discover new artists?
I'm kind of in the point of, I don't go out of my way to discover new music and artists, but if I accidentally come upon them, then I get into it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I kind of get stuck in that. I get stuck in the genre that is comfortable for me. It makes me happy. It brings me back to a great time in my life. So, but if I do come across somebody or a song which is catchy, so that happens too. So say I'm listening and I hear something, I remember it, and I find it later on that day or the next day. And then if I go on my phone or if I go on some sort of playlist, that expands into, well, if you like this, then you may like this and this and this and this. So that's kind of the process for me. But I don't go out of my way to look for new artists. They just kind of happen to fall in place, which is nice, I guess.
When you think about a lot of sports broadcasts, there are moments in the broadcast that are, literally designed to, kind of raise the hair on the arm or on the back of the neck. And more often than not, I'm thinking about the pregame teases. You think about, that's a staple of Hockey Night in Canada. You see NBC when they were covering the NHL, they were constantly bringing in new music. So how important are broadcasts like that, like Hockey Night in Canada, and I recognize that the NHL is switching networks down in the States, but how important is it for new bands, to have that new music used in sports broadcasts? And has there ever been a point where you sat there, you watched a broadcast, you heard the song, go, damn, I have to listen to that album?
Yeah, you know what? And to this day, again, funny how you mentioned this. When the playoffs started, years ago, CBC, for their Hockey Night in Canada, they did this intro, and they had a song, and it was at the beginning of the first round. I think it was the first game, and maybe it was the Leafs against whoever, because every time the Leafs are on, a lot of people, even though they don't like them, it boosts the ratings. But there was this song which captured the moment, and the video that they put with it. It just, I was glued. I was absolutely glued to this, and I got the hair standing on ends. I thought, that is just awesome. And I can't remember the name of it. I did back then, but I looked for it, I found it, and I played it for months, because it just kind of got me going. I think for artists to get a chance to do that, it's great for two reasons. Number one, you obviously get a chance to have your song played, and you get the name out if it's not out as much already, and then it can expand into the other songs. But sports is a part of life. And you go to the CBC broadcast, Hockey Night in Canada, Sportsnet, whatever it is, a Saturday night still, even in the pandemic, is still a huge part of Canada. And it's a huge part of what we have grown up with, and a huge part of the kids' lives now, and the parents and grandparents and all that type of stuff. It brings it together. So if you can find a song that's part of that broadcast that you remember and think, that was a really cool moment. You talk about the intro to the game and different things like that. I think it's great. It's the best of both worlds. So for those artists to get a chance to do that, it's I hope that any artist that does, it's helped their career going forward.
Speaking of music in sports broadcasts, obviously one of the biggest traditions every year, the NCAA March Madness tournament, and you get to that final game, and one shining moment comes on. Do you think there would be an America-wide riot if one year they decided to use a different song other than One Shining Moment?
Yes, I do. Everyone's creatures of habit, right? Like we're creatures of habit. And you mentioned March Madness, and that is, it's a whole different thing in the States than it is in Canada, even though it gets a lot of views and people get into their March Madness pools and the brackets and all that type of stuff. But there's some songs which are staples with broadcasts, whether it be, the NFL, baseball, whatever it is. And I think if you take that away, I understand that, the world, not just with sports, but it's all about evolving and changing, adjusting what's been the norm, but kind of tweaking it, and let's see if we can do this, and then maybe this and this and this. But sometimes you have to keep the originals with them. So yeah, I think that would not go over well. So if anyone hears this that has any connection with maybe doing that, it's not going to happen. Don't do it.
Okay. This kind of like one of those, this or that kind of questions here. Okay. Which to you is the most inspiring, stirring sports song? All right, I'm gonna give you three here. Okay.
Okay.
What? Oh, you don't need to write down. It's One Shining Moment.
Mm-hmm.
We Are the Champions from Queen, or Rocky's victory song, like the Bill Conti soundtrack. Which is going to actually raise the hair on the back of the neck more for you?
Oh, wow. I'm going to say that's a good question. I'm going to say the Rocky one. And maybe it's biased because on my playlist I have a lot of Bill Conti on there, like The Eye of the Tiger, and I know that was Foreigner, I believe, right? I think I'm right with that.
No, Survivor.
So there's that. It was Survivor, right? So, but I have a lot of the Bill Conti on it. I'm going to say that because I know the We Are the Champions one and the other one. So I'm going to go We Are the Champions. And the first one, which one was that again? I know
there was One Shiny Moment.
One Shiny Moment. So I'm going to go with One Shiny Moment 3, We're the Champions 2, and the Rocky 1-1. The We're the Champions one, it's a good one. It's standard. You win the cup and all that type of stuff. But you're not going to play that during a series. You play that whoever wins. The Rocky one, you may be able to play it at some point over the course of the series just to kind of pump you up and do that type of thing. So I'm going to go with that. I'm a massive Rocky fan too, so maybe that's in part why I'm partial to that. So yeah, there we go. Rocky it is for me.
Okay, so now we've come to the point where it's time to pull that list out. So Ryan Paton, if you had to introduce yourself to a total stranger, but instead of saying, hi, I'm Ryan, listen to me on Sirius XM, you hand them a mixtape. And on that tape are songs that tell the story of you. What songs are on that tape and why are those songs there?
Okay. So I'll give you a few. Every Breath You Take by the Police is one. The reason for that goes back to my childhood. And whenever we'd go on road trips, my parents, they loved to travel, but we went on a lot of long drives. I mean, we're talking days. Looking back in it, I think, could we have not taken the plane? All right, fine, whatever. We play that over and over and over again. And my dad used to make these tapes too, specifically for car rides. So that's one that hit me. Another one would be the one that we chatted about by Survivor, the Rocky theme song, Eye of the Tiger. Because I had that when I was playing sports when I was a kid. When we'd be in the locker room, I'd have it in the car when I was driving to a game. So I don't know, it was just one of those that resonated with me. I'd also probably have, see, this is where it gets kind of tougher now. I'd have a Tim Hicks song, which is What a Song Should Do. And part of the line in that song is it should make you go, hell yeah, me too. Like, just kind of like, hey, a song should make you feel good. So that would be another one that would be on my playlist. Anything to do with the 80s. Bon Jovi, Living on a Prayer, for me is one of the greatest ones that I would put out. And then I'd put this one out too, Wes. I don't know. I Saw the Sign by Ace of Base.
Oh, man.
If you want to put that one out.
And I now apologize to our listeners who now have Ace of Base stuck in their head.
Right. I'm so sorry. But I'm kind of pulling the ones out that have some sort of, they stuck with me for a few years off and on. I also like the classic rock. CCR, I like that. I love the Grateful Dead. Some Led Zeppelin. But CCR, I'm a big fan of them. So I think, based on that, I mean, I could go on, but that kind of gives you, I have a diverse range. I don't like something specifically, but I like all types of different genres. So those would be on my mixtape. And I don't know what that says about me, Jason. You can maybe tell me, but that's it.
Well, we do have our love of, discount 90s ABBA, so it's all good, right? Couple more questions here, and they're all more sports music related here.
Yeah.
Being a fan of the 80s music as you were, right? If I were to mention the Chicago Bears and the song that they did, the Super Bowl Shuffle, do you A, how bad was that? And B,
awful.
Do you enjoy when teams kind of not take themselves so seriously and allow themselves to have that kind of fun?
Yeah, I do. Because it makes us realize that they're human. And I say this a lot of times on my show, and I've said this for a long time with athletes, especially when you're younger. When you look at these athletes, you think that they're superhuman, right? You think that they make all this money, they play a sport for a living, they get to travel, they have a lot of wealth, they're well known, but at the end of the day, you get paid to play a game. And you think that they're immune to everything, that they can't get this, they can't get that. But then when you see those moments, number one, that things do happen to them, you realize that they're humans like everybody else. But also when they act like kids, and you also at that moment think they're still kids playing a game. And at the end of the day, that's how they started, being a kid. You don't have pressure when you're a kid. You play for the love of the game. And I know a lot of the athletes do now, but there's a lot of pressure involved, right? You want the big contract. You have to put on, 20, 30 goals every season. You have to hit 40 home runs because that's what you're expected to do. That's a lot of pressure. It doesn't matter who you are and how good you are. That's a lot of pressure. So I'm fine with that. I remember a moment a few years back when the Leafs were in the playoffs, and there was a shot, Living on a Prayer, going back to what we were saying about Bon Jovi. It was being played in the Scotiabank Arena, and Austin Matthews and Mitch Marner were on the bench, and it was in between, it was during a break. And the two of them were looking at each other, singing the chorus. And I thought, okay, I think they're 19, I think they're 20, and they're acting like they're 19, and they're acting like they're 20. And I love it. So I'm good with it. The Super Bowl shuffle whist, it was something. It was something. We'll leave it at that. Jim McMahon, Walter Payton, The Fridge doing their thing, Mike Singletary. It's one of those epic songs. But yeah, I'm good with it. I think it's fun.
I have a feeling people are going to start to go down this YouTube rabbit hole of all the things we mentioned.
You think?
The Super Bowl shuffle. And by the way, if you're going down that YouTube rabbit hole, there's about a 6-minute clip of Vin Scully in all his glory doing an analysis of the number 13 while still continuing play-by-play. It's insane the fact that he was able to just, kind of go back and forth.
Brilliant.
But obviously the biggest marriage between music and sports is the Super Bowl halftime show.
Yes.
To you, what has been the best Super Bowl halftime show, the worst, and who needs to host the next Super Bowl halftime show?
My goodness. Okay. I think the best for me was Bruno Mars. I think that there's just something about him. There's something about him, the electricity, the music, the creativity, the talent, and also when the halftime shows, happen, it's all the lights and there's so much happening, right? So to me, that was one of my favorites. The Michael Jackson one was really cool. I think it was in LA, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember that. Yeah, and I remember that there was like a silhouette, or there was a fake Michael Jackson way up here. Then there was a fake one here, and they shot down, and all of a sudden he shot right up from the ground, from the stage, underneath the stage. So that was a good one too. I'll probably say the one that I didn't like the most, and it's not just for the reason about how it ended, the Janet Jackson, Justin Timberlake thing. I know that they think it wasn't planned, and I think it was. I think they knew exactly what they were doing, but I didn't like that mix of everything. I thought Prince was excellent as well. I thought he did an amazing one. Who should host the next one? Oh my gosh, that's a really tough. Bon Jovi.
Ooh.
No. I'm just saying because
why not, right?
Why not? I don't know. It's a tough one. I know we mentioned as well that I don't mind the country music, but a country artist doing the Super Bowl halftime show, it doesn't quite fit with me. It doesn't quite mix well. I honestly, to be honest, I can't. I don't know who would be on the top of my list to do another one. But if there was one, I'd want it to be somebody who is older, kind of vintage, classic, even if it's a classic rock. I think Bruce Springsteen's done one, right? At some point, he has to have done it.
He did, actually, yes.
Okay, so maybe bring him back or something. A Billy Joel, Elton John, like a combined one, something like that. Just kind of the older school ones that are still doing their thing. So, because I just think sometimes there's too much of this, of the same type of music these days, with Beyonce and all that type of stuff. And we see the same thing all the time at the halftime show. But a lot of people tune in just for that. So it has to be good.
Ryan, thanks so much for this. Where can we hear you on the Sirius XM dial, and where can we find you on social media?
On social media, on Twitter at Ryan Payton 75. And I'm not a big Facebook guy, but if you Google my name or put my name in, you'll find me on that as well. Monday to Friday, I'm on Canada Talks, channel 167, Sports Talk Today. And then on the weekends, on Saturday, I do something called The Hot Stove on Sirius XM channel 91. So that's where you can find me every week.
And thanks so much, Ryan, for this. Really appreciate it. And to all our listeners, thank you for listening in to this episode of Made You a Mixtape. If you're listening to us on an audio streaming service, you can watch this entire interview over on YouTube. However, if you're watching us on YouTube, hi. You can actually go and listen to this on any audio streaming service, including Sirius, not Sirius, Spotify. You see, I got a Sirius host on here. I say Sirius.
There it is.
But we're not on Sirius unless Sirius calls me and we put the show on Sirius. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, TuneIn, whatever you listen to us on, thank you for tuning in. This has been the Made You a Mixtape podcast. I'm your host, Jason. We'll catch you next time. Take care.